Would you welcome, please, Barry Manilow?
I loved Barry Manilow. I loved his music. I loved his sappiness, his emotion. Like, it really totally talked to me. And I remember we were in the car, we were going on vacation, and a Barry Manilow song, and I started to sing along, and my dad started laughing, and he's like, "Hey, did you know that Barry Manilow is AC/DC?" And I was like, "What's AC/DC?" And he said, swings both ways. So it was a very clear message. So he was bisexual, and that was a very bad and laughable thing to be.
It was very clear that if I wanted people to completely abandon me and think that I was repulsive and a little less than human, that I should be myself.
I was assaulted in a violent hate crime in the middle of the afternoon in Berkeley, California. When I talk about the daily experience of what it's like to be a queer person, and what it looks like to insist on living a queer life, for me, it's about knowing what's at stake and knowing what's possible in terms of how violent that rejection can get, but knowing that I don't want another life regardless.
Once I've come to the place in my life where I no longer want to die, it's really hard for me to let anyone threaten my life. I've already survived, and we've already survived.
I am a queer and non-binary Filipino-American, child of Filipino immigrants. I'm a sibling, I'm a cousin, I am a survivor of abuse, and I have PTSD and have lived with depression and struggled with disordered eating in the past. But maybe more importantly and more pertinently to me in my daily life, I'm a poet, I'm an educator, and I am just happy to be here.
I am a Black, non-binary, half American, half not American person. I am multi-ethnic, but you can see I'm blackity black. Like, that's the biggest part of my identity, and that's what people see first. But in addition to that, I am queer, I am pansexual, meaning I'm attracted to people more for their personality than the body that they're in, and that I love lots of different kinds of bodies. I also have Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune thyroid disorder, and I was recently diagnosed with essential tremors. I already knew my hands were shaking, but now I know why. And I have bipolar disorder. So I have a lot going on.
I'm transgender, I'm transmasculine, I'm polyamorous, I'm queer, and but I also am a healer, I'm a teacher, and I heard like a list in my head, but now I'm like, identity labels can help us find community and like a sense of meaning. When we name who we are, it can feel really good. Like, I am this. It helps us, like, there's like a confidence there. But I also find that labels can be restrictive.
I have memories of being attracted to men and women probably going back to when I was 4 or 5. It was just there from the very beginning. And, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. There was very little, almost nothing about bisexuality. It wasn't even like that was an option. You knew people were gay, but at that time, nobody was out as being attracted to different genders.
In the Tagalog language my family grew up speaking, there's no gendered third-person pronoun. And so as my parents were learning English in this country, they would slip between she and he all the time to talk about anybody. I grew up being called she and he on accident or on purpose or whatever, or flipping between the two, and that just feels like home to me.
A lot of people, when they have really internalized a stereotype, if they see someone breaking that, they don't assume the stereotype isn't always true. They think of this person as an outlier. There were a lot of people who had not understood that just because they felt like we were culturally aligned in some ways, and because I have the ability to communicate with lots of different kinds of people, they assumed my Blackness wasn't important to me or like a central part of my identity. So people had categorized me as maybe a good one or different, and didn't understand that I would feel wounded or traumatized by watching George Floyd be murdered. And they didn't understand that it was going to be a wake-up call for me. It doesn't matter how much you try to make people comfortable who are bigoted, you can't win.
I used to use the word mentally ill to describe myself, or disabled. I don't identify that way anymore. It starts to become, that's who you are. You're a mentally ill person. You're sick. You're disabled. Like, instead of, well, this is a person and anxiety is part of her experience. It defines you in a role kind of way.
My identity is actually never on the table for somebody to take away simply because they can't understand it, simply because they deny it. And in a political moment where there's this denial of trans experience, even myself, again, as somebody who moves through this world and is received often as a cis man, and though I'm non-binary, I understand that that's part of my experience. The reality is that, like, I have that in me, and no federal administration, no law, nothing will take that away, is the truth, because you can't take that dignity away. That's here. It's an internal sense.
First and foremost, I'm a creator. It's the essence of who I am. It's what I wake up wanting to be every single morning. What am I going to make today? And who am I going to make it with?
We are proud to present to you the first issue of the Literary Labia, the first poetry journal celebrating women's power here in Georgetown. Woo!
It's like, I exist. I made this. It's beautiful. There's some part of my essence in that beauty that reflects something of myself. You know, here's a little secret. I think that's true of all of us. I think we're all creators.
What do you think?
I think it's good.
Yeah?
I think it's I think it kind of looks like the rainbow.
I mean, from right there, it doesn't look like much other than blue.
Well, that's because of the angle.
Uh-huh. What do we see on this side?
There's the rainbow! Woo!
So Falling Through the Night is my adult novel. It is the story of Audrey Meyerowitz, who is an adoptee who's suffered with an anxiety disorder her whole life. And she dreams of having her own family. So she's just finished this wellness program, and she and her best friend Jessica have talked about putting on a profile on She Loves Her so she can start dating. And she's really nervous. She's really, really nervous. So this is her first date. I guess I should tell you something up front. I have a disability, an anxiety disorder. It's under control, but I take medication and I have a bunch of stuff I do for my health. Cheryl sits back abruptly. Her mouth shifts and one of her lips twitches slightly. Oh, well. I take a breath. I'm just more comfortable telling people in person. It's not a big deal, but people have a lot of questions, there are stereotypes. Well, thanks, it was nice to meet you. She stands, picks up her yellow peacoat and purse, and walks away. I sit and sit until my behind is burning. Then I go home and eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's Super Fudge Chunk ice cream. I didn't always think of it this way, but my artistic practice really was a survival practice for most of my growing up, and it was a part of a healing practice and continues to be. My origin story was my mom said, well, when you were born, You were screaming so loud that all the doctors and the nurses in the hospital came running to see what was wrong with you. What's wrong with Gail? That was the sort of the narrative. So one of the things that I survived is bullying and ostracization by my peers, and that was really an intense and formative part of my growing up. School had always been a refuge up until around 4th, 5th grade. It's funny because I'm thinking I don't have a lot of baggage around being queer. But when I was bullied, the word that they used more than any other word was gay. Gay. That was like the worst thing you could be. I was this weird, autistic, nerdy, kind of different kid, and that was the word. I just developed this awareness that, so certain human beings in our society are worth more than others. And that's wrong. Like, it makes no sense. You know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and it wasn't like I didn't happen to be in a very religious family or a very super homophobia-oriented culture. It wasn't like there was this big, like, being gay is bad. But nobody was out at the time. Nobody was talking about it.
It does make a difference what we see in media because it helps us understand what is normal to other people. And it's very helpful to see yourself reflected back to you. When I was really small, RuPaul was becoming visible. And even though he's not trans, just seeing that a cis man could present however he would like was very comforting to me. I was raised in a very conservative, religious household. And gender norms were very set. It's very patriarchal. Women are encouraged to basically be seen and not heard. Don't be too assertive. Don't exhibit any traits they classify as masculine. So even as a child, before I even started thinking about like, what is gender? Who do I think is attractive? I was constantly being told there is only one way to express gender if you're in this kind of body. It was very clear. I hated wearing dresses. I didn't want to wear frilly socks. I liked practical clothes. And in the 80s and the 90s, practical clothes for people with small frames, like a womb-bearing person, non-existent. So when I would wear clothes that felt more comfortable, they probably were something I got from the boys section. And I even got counseled on that I needed to watch my gender presentation, essentially. And it's the type of religion where if you don't continue to conform, they excommunicate you. So then you literally get cut off from community. So you have to be ready to be dead to the people who raised you and essentially everybody you know. I felt like I was in a constant state of hypervigilance, trying to make sure I kept my secret. And that contributed to my first big issue with Graves' disease. I was told repeatedly, this is generally triggered by stress. But telling somebody to control their stress levels, who's like jumping through hoops to pretend to be someone they're not all the time, who's in a constant state of hypervigilance, that's going to be pretty impossible.
So I grew up in like a very non-traditional household. Like I fit under like the foster adoption umbrella, but I was still raised by like biological family. My aunt, like my mom's sister, is the one who raised me with my brothers, who are my cousins. I love my mom. We have a really, really good relationship, but she was very overprotective. She was very like terrified of bad things happening to me because bad things happened to her as a child. So she was really restrictive, and I wasn't able to have like much of a social life. So what I learned about being in the world was that it seemed to be unsafe to be me. So I was a witness to a lot of pain, like especially like my mom's pain. And I think she leaned on me emotionally a lot too. So all of the pain and fear and struggle that she felt, like I also felt. Like my mom would just have like boyfriends, growing up. Like she was a single mom, but like not all of her boyfriends were like nice to her. Boys only want one thing. That was what was drilled into me. Boys only want one thing. But I was having friends with boys in school, and so I just like was like, I think that's wrong. Like I think you're wrong. Me and like 4 guys in my physics class, we were like the top for like a test or like the top grades in the class. So we all took a picture together, and I had them all like hold me up, and I was like on my side, and they were all just it was like so fun. Like I loved like having my friends who were boys. Like there's never any doubt that my family loves me like to this day. It's like really amazing. And my grandma always taught me to march to the beat of my own drum. You do what you want, you do what you're led to do. Like you're talented, you're amazing. We love you so much. And you should always like march to the beat of your own drum. And that's kind of what I did.
It's complicated for me to talk about this because I want to offer so much grace to my dad and to offer so much love to my family, for both my parents and the rest of my family, while also speaking from my truth and the reality of my experience. I think a lot of queer experiences, we want to simplify the story to being like family rejection, came into myself. I think it's more complicated than that. There are a lot of gray areas, and I live in this gray area constantly.
And I just want to know how long I'm going to have to wait until I can see 2 gay men kiss on network television.
Not as long as you'd think.
Growing up, anytime I saw queer affection, if it was on television, if we were in public and we saw like 2 gay men holding hands, if we saw lesbians kiss, my dad, if I was with my dad, he would make a sound of disgust. Like he would make his disapproval verbally known. And that, really impacted me in a lot of ways, in my ability to come out, in my ability to access that for myself. Because the feelings I was having around what pleasure and desire felt like to me, what embodiment felt like to me, who I had crushes on, like those were always real to me. So I did feel a need to hide some of that. My late mother, I didn't come out to her. She found out. She found out I was dating my first boyfriend in high school, and she didn't receive it well. She did not receive well that I was gay, which was like really heartbreaking because I always understood her to have like had gay friends growing up and like being this really like strong woman who is very progressive in the family, that was very devoutly Catholic, but still was on the progressive side of the family. And something that she said to me was that she discouraged me actively from telling my dad, from disclosing this to my dad, and that to do so would be to endanger the family, because he would abandon us. It was so this is something that was in my head for a long time. Part of the grace and dignity I want to offer my parents is that their reaction to my queerness is not without context as well, right? They're immigrants to this country. The narratives they told themselves and me growing up is they came here to have a better life for me. What happens when I go to high school and I'm being told I'm going to burn in hell? Is that a better life? I started dating my first high school boyfriend at 16. Right before then, I had made up my mind. I was like, I'm going to call it a wash. Like, high school, let me just get through it. I don't have to tell all these people this stuff. I'll get to college. I had determined to myself, I'm going to go to Berkeley. I'm going to get there, and I'll just be gay. People will be gay. It's Berkeley.
For the 3rd straight day, thousands marched in California protesting the election night passage of Proposition 8.
This was 2008, and marriage equality vote was going up. And I grew up again in suburban San Diego, and it's a relatively conservative area. And my high school boyfriend and I decided that we should come out publicly to our classmates. We want folks to understand that gay people aren't this theoretical over there, that we can have a conversation about, that we've been your classmates since we were kids. A lot of folks were very, very sweet, and I still have so much softness and tenderness for all of my high school classmates that were so affirming and welcoming and celebratory of that act. At the same time, there were a lot of folks who were not into it. There was a MySpace profile, MySpace, and there were photos of me and my boyfriend that were posted up there, and captions were like, "These faggots will burn in hell." I was shaken at times, but also I felt a swell of pride and excitement to be able to say I did something brave. In those earlier days where I had this kind of feeling of threat around my world collapsing, should I come out or be in the truth of my experience and who I was, my nervous system was definitely a bit frazzled. My first relationship with that high school sweetheart, it ended for a lot of reasons, but part of the dissolution of that relationship was that I was deeply depressed, and I was struggling with navigating self-harm and suicidal ideation, because of my experience of familial rejection. And so when I'd left for college, there was a part of me that was so single-mindedly focused on this will save me. And that quickly translated to, no, oh no, not gonna save me, but I have to try something. And I have to find this like life worth living and to build that for myself.
I fell in love with a friend of mine named Lisa, and I was 19 and she was 18. We had our first kiss it was the balcony of the main lodge, and nobody else was around. And it was this mix of thrilling, exciting, like electrifying, and terrifying. Because now it's real. It's not just a fantasy. It's not just something I've been thinking about. And so I'm Jewish, but I was never a religious kid. But all of these kind of old messages is like, okay, what if I really am going to hell? Because I had that relationship. What if I'm a lesbian, and what if I'll never be accepted by anybody? And then fast forward into the 90s, I went to graduate school, and up until that point, most of the organizations were called the Gay and Lesbian Association. There was no, all the other letters they weren't part of it. And during that time, there was a big conversation about whether bisexuality should be included. And I remember going to the Gay and Lesbian Association at the school and saying, I just want to know if I'm welcome here. And they decided to take a vote about whether they should include bisexuals, and they decided not to. That was the most difficult thing, because when I came out, I felt like, oh, the queer community, I felt like I'd really come home. And then to realize, well, at least I don't really have a place here unless I kind of just sign off and say I'm not with men anymore. That was kind of the admission price, and I didn't feel very willing to pay that. So that was the hardest part for me about coming out. I felt lots and lots of biphobia.
I remember like really, really wanting there to be a gay straight alliance in my high school because I really wanted to be an ally to gay people. Like there wasn't really any representation for me to see. So then when I learned that the non-binary identity existed and you don't have to have any particular experience to be non-binary, like you can just be non-binary, I was like, I'm non-binary. That's awesome. But there was like a feeling of restriction I felt with my body and what I was able and allowed to do. But once I learned, like, even though I have gendered experiences, that doesn't mean I have freedom with how I can identify and express myself and like live. And it felt like it opened more doors for me. I never felt the need to have like a coming out. Again, the labels helped me figure out who I am, as I've also found ways to express myself outside of labels themselves,
It made me very anxious, and I had just accepted I would be abandoned by family. And I feel like it's always been easier for me to communicate with my dad. He's equally religious, but a little less judgmental by nature. I knew the face-to-face conversation would be too much for me. I knew that it was going to be really impossible for my mom to hide on her face how she was feeling, even if she didn't want to hurt my feelings. So I wrote a letter. I didn't know how bad it would feel. I figured, I'm an adult. I don't need my parents for safety and support anymore. I'm ready. But to hear my mom say in so many words, I am heartbroken. This is disgusting. Now everybody knows. It was really hard to hear. It's hard to imagine what it feels like going through that when you're at a very vulnerable age, but it was still difficult even in my 40s. Earlier in life, it just wouldn't have been safe. I wouldn't have had any kind of social support. It just would have been too much. But once that was out there, I felt totally free to be 100% myself as much as could come to me naturally. Because when you've been suppressing who you really are for a while, for the sake of safety even, accepting that you are safe now is difficult.
There are ways that I've become less anxious in the world because of my transition. A lot of trans men will tell you that, walking at night isn't scary to me anymore. But there's also, the fear of being visible, because the political rhetoric around trans people right now is, very negative. But the more I sink into myself as a trans and queer person, the less I the more confident I become. But then it's also my anxious thoughts and my overactive imagination will get together and show me all of the horrible ways I could be hurt in this world or killed for being who I am. And it's I can't live believing that. I can't function believing those things. So I have to live as if none of those things are going to happen to me, because they're probably not.
So I get to college and I have this experience of having community. But in my last year at Berkeley, my then partner and I were followed home from a movie, and I was assaulted in a violent hate crime, a homophobic hate crime, where a man, a stranger to me, someone I didn't know, asked me if we were gay. So he asked me and my then partner if we were gay. We were both like, "Hey, buddy, leave us alone." And then pulled out a knife. And so that was an experience that I had. I was in the hospital for 3 days, and that was when I came out to my dad. A nurse was there, a Filipino nurse was asking me what happened. We're speaking in Taglish, a little bit back and forth, code switching. And of course, as the concerned auntie she was like, and you called your parents? And I was like, oh. I was like, whoa. And she was like, why not? And I told her, I was like, I'm scared to, because this happened because I'm gay. And she was like, they couldn't possibly care about that. You need to tell them. And she was right. And so I did call my parents. This is how I came out to my dad. This was the first time they were both meeting my then partner. It was a whole thing. And I share that story now to inform this conversation about my daily experience and how I navigate this world, because I don't know what else you could take from me. You almost killed me. This person was tried for attempted murder. Having lived through those macro aggressions, I understand microaggressions to be, I don't diminish them. I don't find them no less hurtful, but I understand the scale of what the harm that can be brought to me is. And so, which is not to say it doesn't nick and it doesn't hurt. And that's the whole thing about microaggressions. They are something I tolerate on the daily basis. Come in through comments, through backhanded things, and they feel like small little nicks until there's enough that it hurts a lot. This is a poem called Self-Portrait in a Canadian Tuxedo on the Road to St. George, Utah. Nothing is new, least of all a world. Phantoms and husks of empire litter highways stretching from the Bakersfield drive-up ATM to the Vegas Costco gas. Manifest destiny in her loveless slip of strip malls and Western hunger. She and her kin in the afterlife flesh, roadside pastiche, Looney Tunes tumbleweeds, sellers' namesakes plaqued on stucco come adobe, gift shops in the shape of covered wagons, fascist campaign slogans, my Lolo's face, I divine from the mountain. I wear olive green boots. I can't button my jeans as high on my waist as I once did, and they tear where my thighs kiss. Like my forefathers in vinegar-stained shirt fronts before me, their vulgar-lidded eyes crested on the mouth of beer bottle after beer bottle, the coil of time tightened fast in my shape. I fold, considering what it might mean to know, with no doubt, in the past tense, I was here.
For me, queerness is about freedom to be yourself. And it's a whole culture that encourages creative expression and self-acceptance. We want for everybody to be able to come to the party where they get to live life the way they want to live it. So knowing that that is going away, there's this big sense of grief, because anytime you lose something without your consent or something's taken from you, you feel grief.
It's not the first time that it's been unsafe to be queer, to be trans. It's not the first time that it's been unsafe to be a queer person of color for me in my lifetime, let alone in the long history of all the queer and trans people who've come before me. And there's something that is like, it's such a gift to be queer, because to be queer is to be in a lineage of all of this testimony to how people have survived and that we're still here and we still are queer in our joy and the way we connect with each other, in our romance and our sex, in our community, and our just the way we see one another. There's something about having that connection that makes it really affirming for me, even in a moment of kind of mass dysregulation. There's a center I can come back to.
I think being in the moment is the only way. And my individual moment has so much good in it. You know, I've got my goofy 15-year-old kid and my amazing partner and my phenomenal best friend, and I've got weaving, and I've got music, and I've got a beautiful city that I get to live in, Ottawa. That's as real as the other horrible stuff that's happening.
A natural reaction to discrimination is to disconnect even more from our bodies and to eat for reasons aside from psychological hunger. Weight stigma damages health. Racism damages health. Colorism damages health. Homophobia damages health. Transphobia damages health. Stigmatizing people is always destructive.
You know, one of the things people have been saying and finding hope in is like queer people will always be here. And like, I think that's good, but we can't stop there. I literally journaled the other day, like, what does it look like if I extended love to the people who are actively fighting for my erasure? This feeling of gratitude arises where I am so grateful you're showing me how brave I am. I'm grateful that your dedication to erasing me is showing me how I cannot be erased. And it's like, so when you extend love towards the people who are doing things that make you feel the most afraid, like that's where bravery, I've been finding my bravery is when it's like, oh, like I have to be brave. It's actually the second poem in a 2-poem part. So it's called Vernal Momentum. The heat of my ancestors' lives survives within me, extending farther than I can see. The wisdom I carry is their gift to me. Now my senses expand beyond my body, and I commune with everything I touch. Divine trust surrounds me like a blessing. Inferno is something we all must contend with. I am no longer afraid of my fire, finding faith in the shifting seasons. This land will change again, and I with it. For now, I plant myself with the sun. I am the ember pulsing in the sand, ready for whatever comes next.